Okay, so welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something quite heavy, actually. It's an intense topic, but a really necessary one. We're going deep into the source materials about, well, accountability, consequence, divine warning.
That's right.
Specifically looking at descriptions of eternal consequence, Jahannam, from the foundational texts, the Qur'an and the hadith.
And it is a weighty subject. Definitely needs, real respect in how we approach it. Our aim here, it's really not about fear-mongering, is it? It's more about reflection, getting some clarity.
Exactly.
Because these themes, accountability, justice, the consequences of our choices, they resonate, I think, universally, regardless of your specific background. Understanding sort of the potential final outcome helps clarify the path we need to take now. It's like a moral compass helping us aim for being genuinely good people.
That's a really helpful way to frame it. It's about understanding the stakes, maybe. If you know the edge is there and it's serious, you walk more carefully.
Precisely. You pay more attention to each step.
And what's striking in these sources is how quickly this huge concept becomes, a direct command, an action item.
Yes. The core message is that this accountability, it's not passive. You don't just wait and see. If you look at Surah At-Tahrim, verse 6, it's explicit. It says, "O you who believe, save yourselves and your families from a fire."
That's quite a responsibility. Save yourselves and your families. It's not just personal.
Absolutely not. It implies protection requires effort, real focused action. Your deeds, your words, your whole attitude. And the scope, like you said, it's wider than just you, spouse, children, relatives. Spiritual well-being is sort of a shared family thing.
So it's less a solitary journey, more a communal mission almost.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay, so to really set the stage for this immense consequence, there's a fascinating anecdote in the sources, isn't there? It really draws the contrast between reward and punishment.
You mean the cosmic dialogue? Yes, that's in Hadith Bukhari. It's quite something. Heaven Jannah and Hell Jahannam, they actually speak to each other.
Speak to each other? Wow.
Yeah.
What do they say?
Well, Jannah sort of complains first. Says, it seems like only the poor, the struggling, the people who didn't have much status on earth are entering.
Which implies that entry isn't about worldly success.
Exactly. It's about humility, effort, maybe the internal struggle, not about wealth or power. Then Hell, Jahannam, observes the opposite. It says, only the arrogant, the disobedient seem to be coming my way.
So pride, disobedience, that's the pathway there.
It connects that cosmic picture right back to human attitudes, doesn't it? Those who felt self-sufficient, maybe rejected accountability. And Allah's response to this dialogue clarifies their roles. Heaven is his mercy for the obedient. Hell is his punishment for the defiant.
Total contrast. Eternal pleasure versus eternal torment, which really brings us to needing to understand the sheer scale of that torment. So let's try and unpack that scale. Because reading the descriptions, you have to ditch any human ideas of size or buildings. It's something else entirely.
It is. The descriptions are meant to convey something about the Creator's power and justice, something vast. The sources, Hadith Muslim and Tirmidhi especially, give figures that are just hard to grasp. On the day of judgment, hell is brought forth. It's so massive, it's bound by, get this, 70,000 chains.
70,000 chains.
Yes. And it doesn't stop there. For each one of those chains, there are 70,000 angels pulling it, holding it back.
Okay, wait. 70,000 times 70,000. That's nearly 5 billion angels just to restrain it.
That's the image conveyed. It immediately removes any human idea of controlling it or escaping it. The scale is just overwhelming.
And that's just the sort of width or breadth of it. What about the depth?
The depth is described in equally staggering terms. There's a reliable hadith that says if you threw a stone from the edge, the main entrance, it would fall for 70 years before hitting the bottom.
70 years, a whole lifetime just falling.
Exactly. It's not just a deep pit. It illustrates a kind of profound, seemingly endless descent, the permanence of it all.
And it's structured, right? It's not just one big abyss.
Correct. Surah Al-Hijr mentions it has 7 distinct doors or gates. But here's where it gets more specific about the nature of sin.
Okay.
Because those gates lead to different levels. Not all suffering is the same, it seems. It corresponds to the type of offense.
Different levels for different sins.
Yes. And the most chilling detail is about the hypocrites, the Miafikin, those who pretended faith but secretly worked against it.
Where are they placed?
Surah An-Nisa states they're in the lowest level, the very bottom, the most severe stratum.
Why is that? Why is hypocrisy seen as worse than, say, outright disbelief? It seems counterintuitive almost.
Well, think about it. Open opposition, you can see it, address it, but hypocrisy, It eats away at the community from the inside. It undermines trust, faith itself. So the sources seem to view that internal betrayal as perhaps a greater threat, warranting the deepest consequence.
Right, it corrupts the system itself. Okay, so moving from the sheer size to the actual experience. The fire. We think of fire, volcanoes, forges. But these descriptions seem to say that's nothing in comparison.
Absolutely negligible. A key hadith, found in both Bukhari and Muslim, states that the hottest fire we know on earth is only 1 part out of 70 parts of the fire of hell.
1/70th. So the hellfire is
intensified 69 times beyond our hottest possible fire.
There's that story, isn't there, where the companions heard this and were just stunned. They said something like, "Surely, God, the fire we have now is bad enough."
Yes, exactly. They thought earthly fire was already sufficient punishment. But the Prophet confirmed, no, Allah multiplied its intensity 69 times more. It's meant to convey a level of consequence that's truly beyond our earthly frame of reference.
And the color of this fire is also different, right? Not the red or orange we imagine.
No. The sources describe it as intensely black, utter darkness. This is attributed to sort of cosmic timescales. It burned for 1,000 years, turning red, another 1,000 years, turning white. And a final 1,000 years turned it completely black.
Black fire, suggesting maybe the densest, most intense heat imaginable.
That's the implication. Maximum sustained, inescapable heat.
And the fuel source is, well, it's disturbing. Surah al-Baqarah says its fuel is mankind and stones. Not wood, not oil.
Right, and that choice seems very deliberate. Why those two?
Yeah, why?
Well, stones are incredibly good at absorbing and holding heat, right? And under extreme temperatures, they can shatter, explode violently.
Okay, I can see that.
And mankind, well, the bodies of the inhabitants themselves become part of this fuel cycle. It creates this self-sustaining, horrifically efficient combustion, constant violent eruption and burning.
Okay, and watching over all this, guarding this immense black, superheated reality, are specific angels, the Zabaniyah.
The Zabaniyah, yes. Surah At-Tahrim describes them very clearly. Harsh, stern, and strictly obedient. There's no sense of pity, no empathy in their description. The texts emphasize absolutely no negotiation. Their only purpose is to execute the divine command.
What does that do to the inhabitants psychologically, knowing their guards are completely unfeeling, unstoppable? Does that lack of any possible appeal just add to the torment?
It must amplify the despair, absolutely. Their total rigidity means no plea works, no moment of weakness gets a pass, it crushes hope, and their size is described as overwhelming too, meant to eliminate any thought of resistance.
How big are they described?
The Prophet gave an analogy. A fast horse rider would take somewhere between 60 and 100 years just to cross half of the neck or shoulder span of one of these guardian angels.
60 to 100 years, just across the shoulder.
Yes. They're depicted as utterly immense, overwhelming beings. Their sole function is enforcement, pure, unyielding execution of the sentence.
So we move from the kind of the physical setup of the place to the actual experience of being there. And the core of that seems to be this relentless, nonstop agony.
Yes, that's the essence of it, the complete removal of any end, any rest, especially death. Surah Al-Furqan calls it a lasting destruction. Unlike suffering here, where, eventually there's death or sleep or just exhaustion.
Yeah.
There, it's constant, absolute, eternal.
And this constant pain is kept fresh by, well, one of the most graphic details in the source is the skin renewal.
Ah, yes. Surah An-Nisa, verse 56. It's very direct. Every time their skin is completely burned away, utterly consumed by the fire,
right,
Allah replaces it instantly with new, fresh skin. And the text says, why? So they may taste the punishment again.
So the pain is felt during the burning and during the immediate recreation. It's a cycle designed for maximum feeling.
A continuous, perfectly engineered cycle of agony. Maximum neurological input constantly renewed.
And to make sure there's enough surface area for this pain, the bodies themselves are changed. They become huge.
That's a critical point, yes. The body is magnified enormously. To match the scale of the eternal consequence, the canvas for the pain has to be vast. Prophetic narrations describe a single molar tooth.
Just one tooth.
Being the size of Mount Uhud, which is a huge landmark mountain.
Wow.
And the skin's thickness is described as either 42 cubits, that's around 20 meters, maybe 65 feet, or, in another narration, as thick as the distance covered in a 3-day journey.
20 meters thick skin or a 3-day journey. It's not even recognizably human anymore at that scale. It's just this enormous capacity for absorbing pain.
Precisely. If your skin is that thick, the time it takes to burn through it is extended dramatically. It ensures the maximum duration and intensity before that renewal cycle kicks in again.
Okay. Beyond the fire itself, the food and drink, it's not about sustenance, is it? It sounds like it's just another form of torture, making hunger and thirst terrifying.
Exactly. The fluids described are particularly horrific. One is called sadid. It's described as being like pus. Yes. The pus and blood that weeps from the wounds of the inhabitants themselves. They're forced to drink their own sort of collective decomposition.
Sustained by their own suffering,
Yeah.
literally.
And then there are the boiling fluids. Surah Al-Kahfi mentions water like molten iron or copper, scalding hot metal.
What happens when they drink that?
The description is graphic. It scalds the face as it's brought near. When drunk, it penetrates the head, melts the internal organs all the way down until it exits through the feet.
And then
The process reverses and repeats constantly.
is there a specific drink mentioned for certain sins committed on Earth?
Yes, Tinat al-Kabal. This is described as the pus, or the sort of bodily fluids, the ooze of the people of hell, specifically reserved for those who were habitual drinkers of intoxicants khamr in life and didn't repent.
A specific consequence tailored to the earthly vice.
It seems so. And the food. The notorious tree of Zaqqum.
Right, I've heard of that. What is it like?
Surah Adukan calls it the food of the sinners. Its fruit is described as being like molten copper or boiling oil. Once swallowed, it boils inside the stomach like scalding water.
That sounds bad enough, but there's a measure given for its toxicity, isn't there?
There is. A truly terrifying measure. The prophet said that if just one single drop of Zaqqum were to fall onto the earth,
One drop.
it would destroy all means of livelihood for all inhabitants of the earth. It would corrupt everything.
One drop would ruin the entire planet, and yet
Yeah,
that's their compulsory food.
that's the only food. It continues the torment. They eat it, their insides boil and swell, then they desperately drink the boiling fluids trying to cool it, which just melts them further. It's a dreadful cycle.
And the sounds. What is the soundscape of this place?
Constant despair, weeping. The sources say initially their tears are so profuse they could float a boat.
Float a boat.
But eventually the tears run dry and they weep blood. But perhaps the most hopeless sound is their unanswered cries. They call out to the guards, the Zabaniya, begging for just a moment's relief. They receive no answer for 40 years.
40 years of shouting into silence at guards who feel nothing.
Then finally they turn to God himself, begging for release, pleading for annihilation even. This goes on for durations likened to the entire lifespan of the world, maybe millions of years of pleading.
And the response?
The final crushing response comes. Mentioned in Surah Al-Mu'minun, God says, "Remain despised therein and do not speak to me."
Do not speak to me. That's absolute finality.
It's the ultimate cutting off. After that, the sources say their voices change. No more articulate pleading, just this awful, indistinct wailing, like the braying of a donkey. The complete end of communication, the end of hope.
Okay. We've described the destination in detail. Now, what are the paths that lead there? The sources are very clear about the kinds of actions, the kinds of beliefs that result in this.
Yes, they are. Broadly, you can see two main categories of offenses. The first, and the most fundamental, is shirk, associating partners with God. Polytheism, idolatry in its various forms.
And Surah Nisa says this is the one sin God won't forgive if someone dies in that state.
Correct. If someone dies having committed shirk and hasn't repented from it, that's considered unforgivable because it strikes at the very root of faith, the absolute oneness and sovereignty of the Creator.
Now, historically, shirk meant worshiping idols like Hubal, right? But how does that translate to today? What does associating partners look like now?
That's a crucial question. It's not just about statues anymore, though that still exists. In a modern sense, shirk can mean treating anything created, whether it's an object, a person, a job, money, an ideology, even your own ego, as if it has ultimate power, relying on it for protection or fortune or salvation instead of God. It could be using amulets or charms believing they have power, or consulting fortune tellers, sorcerers, people who claim access to hidden knowledge or power that belongs only to God, even if they use, deceptive religious-looking symbols.
So it's about where your ultimate trust lies, what you truly depend on, or perhaps even what you ultimately fear more than God.
Exactly. It's about dependence and fear. Making something other than the Creator your ultimate reality. There's that story about Amru bin Jammu, the old man devoted to his personal idol.
Right, tell us that one.
His sons had converted to Islam, And they wanted to show him the powerlessness of this idol. So night after night, they'd sneak it away and dump it in a rubbish pit face down.
Okay.
You'd retrieve it, clean it, perfume it, then they did it again. Finally, they tied a dead dog's carcass to its neck and threw it back in the pit. When Amru found it like that, humiliated, unable even to keep a dead dog off itself, the penny dropped. He realized this thing had no power at all. He couldn't rely on it.
A very direct lesson in where true power lies. Okay, so that's shirk. What's the second major category of sin leading to this consequence?
This one is perhaps even more critical for our daily lives, violating the rights of other people. Hukuk al-nas.
Rights of people. How's that different from sins against God, like missing prayers?
The distinction is vital. Sins primarily against God, missed prayers, fasts, etc. Those can potentially be forgiven through direct repentance to God, Kaaba. But sins against fellow human beings, the sources are emphatic. Allah delegates the judgment for those. They will not be resolved by God until the person who was wronged gets their due justice on the day of judgment.
So God doesn't just wipe the slate clean if you've harmed someone else. The victim has to have their say.
Precisely. Human dignity is paramount. God empowers the victim to claim their right. This makes sins against people incredibly risky because you need their forgiveness or you face settling the score on that day.
What kinds of violations are we talking about?
The texts usually group them into three main areas. First, material theft or unpaid debt. Stealing property, money, not repaying loans. The only way out is to apologize and return what was taken or its value before you die.
Okay, clear enough. What's second?
Second, reputational harm. This is huge today. We're talking gossip, ghibah, slander, fitna, spreading rumors, false accusations, anything that damages someone's name and standing. To fix this, you have to apologize to the person and actively try to repair their reputation where you damaged it, which, as you can imagine,
is often practically impossible, especially now with things spreading online, once it's out there.
Exactly. Gossip often gets treated like casual hot news, but the sources see it as creating a massive debt that's incredibly hard, sometimes impossible, to fully repay. That makes it terrifyingly serious.
Okay. And the third category?
Third is physical harm. Assault, injury, causing bodily harm to someone. This requires apology and forgiveness from the victim, or, in a just system, cases retribution or recompense. The sources even detail specific compensations to show the gravity, like needing to pay the equivalent of 10 camels for knocking out a single tooth.
Wow. Okay, so shirk and violating human rights. Are there other specific behaviors highlighted? Misconduct or negligence?
Yes. There's a strong emphasis on personal accountability, regardless of who you are or who you're related to. The Prophet Muhammad himself publicly warned his own tribe, the Quraysh. He even specifically addressed his own beloved daughter, Fatima, saying something like, "O Fatima, daughter of Muhammad, ask me for whatever you wish from my wealth, but I cannot avail you anything against Allah." Meaning, he couldn't save her based on lineage alone. She needed her own good deeds.
So, no nepotism in salvation. Your connection to someone pious doesn't guarantee anything.
Not at all. Accountability is individual. And then, a specific hadith in Sahih Muslim names two groups explicitly destined for the fire due to their actions.
Who are they?
First, tyrannical rulers, guards, or enforcers, described as carrying whips like the tails of cows who oppress and unjustly beat people. It's a direct condemnation of abuse of power and state-sanctioned violence.
A warning against oppression. And the second group?
The second group is described as women who are clothed yet naked.
Clothed yet naked. What does that mean?
The explanation given is that it refers to wearing clothing that is technically covering the body, but is so tight or sheer or revealing that it actually emphasizes the body's shape and doesn't fulfill the purpose of modest dress. It draws attention rather than deflecting it. The description also mentions their heads being styled in a way that resembles the tilted humps of camels, perhaps referring to very elaborate attention-grabbing hairstyles.
And the warning for this group?
It's severe. The hadith says they will not enter heaven, nor will they even smell its fragrance, despite its scent being detectable from a vast distance. It underlines the importance placed on modesty and avoiding ostentation in personal conduct and appearance.
Okay, so we've covered the severity, the causes. It's intense. But the sources aren't just about warnings, right? They're fundamentally a guide. They show a path away from this, a path to protection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the crucial other side of the coin. This system is designed with hope built in. And the ways to seek protection are made deliberately accessible. Think about what the Prophet said. Fear the fire, seek protection from it, even if with half a date given in charity.
Half a date, that's almost nothing.
Almost nothing materially, but it represents the intention, the effort. And he continued, if someone cannot even manage that, then protection can be sought with just a kind word.
A kind word. So literally everyone has the means to take that first step towards safety. There's no excuse based on poverty or lack of resources.
Precisely. It emphasizes the sincerity of the heart, the willingness to act over the sheer size of the contribution. It's about the gesture of turning towards goodness. And beyond charity, there are specific prayers taught for protection.
Right, you mentioned one the Prophet recommended frequently.
Yes, it's a powerful supplication, often recited before the final salam at the end of the formal prayer. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhabi Jahannam, which means, O Allah, I seek refuge in you from the punishment of Jahannam and from the punishment of the grave and from the trials of the Antichrist, Dajjal, and from the trials of life and death.
So explicitly asking for refuge from hell, the grave, the ultimate deception, and life's hardships. Making that part of your regular worship sounds like a constant reminder.
It reinforces that spiritual vigilance, and there's even a mention of a sort of daily practice for building commitment.
What's that?
Asking Allah specifically for protection from the fire, and asking for entry into paradise 7 times each day. The narration suggests that if a person does this sincerely, then both the fire and paradise themselves will testify on that person's behalf on the day of judgment. The fire will say, O Lord, protect him from me, and paradise will say, O Lord, admit him into me.
Wow. The destinations themselves advocate for you. Okay, now, what about believers who did commit sins, maybe serious ones, but they died still holding on to faith? They weren't hypocrites or polytheists, but they messed up and didn't fully repent. What happens to them?
This is where the concepts of divine justice meeting divine mercy become really apparent, especially through intercession. For these believers, sometimes called mumin al-asi, the believing sinner, their punishment in the fire, if decreed, is intended to be proportional to their unrepented sins. But crucially, it is not eternal.
Not eternal. That's the key difference.
Yes. Unlike the disbelievers, hypocrites, and polytheists for whom it is eternal, these individuals undergo a period of purification. It's a consequence, but a temporary one, designed to cleanse them before they can potentially enter paradise. This is where sayfat, or intercession, plays a role.
Who gets to intercede? And for whom?
The sources state that permission for intercession will be granted, primarily to the Prophet Muhammad, but also to angels and to other pious believers. They can plead to Allah for the release of those who died, possessing at least that foundational core of faith, iman, even if it was alongside sins.
So others can essentially petition for mercy on behalf of those being purified.
Yes. And the description of their eventual exit from the fire is, well, it's quite profound. They emerge, according to the hadith, completely burnt, like charcoal or scorched husks. Qadu is the word used.
Just remnants.
Yes. But then they are taken and immersed in the river of life, the Nar al-Hayat, which flows near the gates of paradise.
The river of life. What happens there?
This is where the mercy is so evident. They begin to regenerate, to grow back. The analogy used is like seeds sprouting gently on the banks of a stream after rainfall. A slow, soft, restorative growth.
A complete contrast to the destructive cycle of skin renewal inside the fire. This is healing, rebirth.
Exactly. It's purification followed by complete restoration. They emerge fully renewed, cleansed of the effects of the fire, ready to potentially enter paradise. And they're given a specific name, a beautiful title, Utaka Ar-Rahman.
What does that mean?
Those freed by the Most Merciful. It explicitly highlights that while their temporary suffering was a matter of justice for their sins, their ultimate salvation and entry into bliss comes purely from Allah's overwhelming mercy, granted because they held on to that core of faith.
Freed by the Most Merciful. That's powerful. Okay, so after everyone is sorted, believers purified, others in their place, is there a final definitive moment described? Something that seals the permanence of it all?
Yes. There's a very dramatic final event described in the sources, the end of mortality itself. Once everyone from heaven is in heaven and everyone from hell is in hell and their states are settled, death itself is brought forward.
Death is brought forward. How?
It's personified. As confirmed in a hadith from Muslim, death is brought forth in the form of a ram, a big horned ram.
Okay. A ram representing death. What happens to it?
It's led to a place between paradise and hell, in full view of the inhabitants of both realms. And then, death is slaughtered.
Death itself is killed.
Yes. Symbolizing the absolute end of endings. The end of any possibility of cessation or change in state. And after death is slaughtered, a proclamation rings out to both sides.
What does it say?
O people of paradise, eternity, there is no more death. And, O people of hell, eternity, there is no more death.
The same message, but with opposite effects.
Exactly. For the people of paradise, hearing this confirms their bliss is absolutely endless and their joy increases beyond measure. For the people of hell, hearing that there is definitively no escape, no end, no death to release them, their sorrow, their despair increases instantly. It seals the permanence. It becomes truly, irrevocably eternal.
Wow, that's quite the final punctuation mark on everything. This has been, well, undeniably challenging, but also, I think, incredibly necessary to really look closely at these descriptions of consequence from the sources.
It is heavy,
Yep.
but the clarity is important. We've talked about the scale, the intensity, the eternity, not, as we said at the start, just to invoke fear, but hopefully to, galvanize us, to make us think about our actions now.
Right. And the warnings seem very grounded. The biggest dangers aren't necessarily esoteric things. It's shirk relying on created things more than the creator. And it's violating the rights of other people. Those debts, especially reputational harm, are so hard to fix.
They really are. Those who quote Gulnaz violations carry immense weight because settling them depends on the person you wronged.
But then the flip side is also true. The path to protection, the positive actions, they're made so accessible. Giving half a date, just offering a kind word. It's about the heart's direction, the effort, not just grand gestures.
Exactly. It brings it within everyone's reach. And the goal shouldn't just be, phew, I barely avoided hell.
Yeah.
The sources encourage ambition. Strive for the highest levels of paradise. Pursue the good with energy.
That positive striving. And the hope is always there, even for believers who sinned. Through that purification and the immense mercy shown in their eventual release, those freed by the most merciful.
That concept of mercy, alongside justice, is central. We even noted that source mentioning some people being removed from the fire simply because they remembered God sincerely one day, or feared him in one specific moment or place. That tiny spark of connection mattered.
So it really brings us to a point of reflection, doesn't it? For you listening, we want to leave you with a final thought, something to maybe mull over, based on everything we've explored.
Yeah, think about this. We saw that the path to protection can involve the absolute smallest acts of good that have a date, the kind word. And we saw that the absolute greatest danger is shirk, which fundamentally boils down to depending on or fearing created things more than the creator.
So the question for you is, what is one thing in your life right now? Maybe it's a job, a relationship, your financial security, a personal ambition, even a fear about the future.
What's one thing that you might be honestly relying on or maybe fearing more intensely than you rely on or fear God himself?
If there's something worldly that's commanding that level of ultimate dependence or ultimate fear in your heart, perhaps this deep dive is a prompt, a nudge to maybe recalibrate that focus, to consciously shift that reliance back to the Creator, strengthening that core of Tawhid, absolute reliance on the One.
Using this knowledge not just as a warning, but as a tool to refine your path, aiming for genuine goodness and that ultimate connection.
A profound thought to reflect on. Thank you, truly, for exploring this deep and vital topic with us today.
Thank you. It was important.